Hey everyone, Carl here with Littleroot Lessons, bringing you a deep dive featuring Groudon this week. Groudon is one of the weather duo that's probably fan favorite, but less popular, if that makes sense. Groudon surprised us in Series 8 with its overwhelming force and players cut 4 and all that stuff. So let's take a look at Groudon and see what it can offer for you as a restricted pick. Before we get started, though, make sure to do all the fun YouTube stuff for us. Comment, like, subscribe, do all that stuff. I'm interested in seeing who you all want to see me cover next week. And if you want to leave your favorite Pokemon of the weather duo down below, I'd be more than happy to interact with that way too. So, Groudon. Groudon is a bulky offensive restricted that, like I mentioned, is the other half of the weather duo, the other half being Kyogre. Setting Sun isn't all Groudon does, though. But it is what it does best. Like in Series 8, Groudon was very powerful with Gigantamax Venusaur and Charizard, and you had screens, and could just keep your Groudon alive for a very long time while just hoping to hit Precipice Blades over and over and over. Well, for Series 10, that's kind of changed. It was this resident sleeper pick in Series 8, as many players had just kind of brushed it off, thinking Kyogre was just superior, and in some cases, Kyogre is. However, Groudon stood firm, pushing the powerful Sun cores to the front of the format and becoming a force to be reckoned with. However, in Series 10, with the removal of Dynamax, a lot of Groudon's original partners from Series 8 are no longer as viable as they once were. Things like Venusaur and Charizard have been replaced with Pokemon like Serena, Incineroar, Arcanine, things like that. But it might be enough to where Groudon can probably get its spot back in the spotlight. Hopefully. It depends on how well Kyogre can adapt to this format. Common partners for Groudon usually were the Sun Abusers. Other Pokemon in this kind of vein fall into Lilligant, Cherrim, which we saw on Wolfey's team a while back, and things like that. But since the removal of Dynamax, Venusaur and Charizard have kind of just fallen out of favor. No one really plays with them anymore. There's no Dynamax spread move damage threat out of that anymore. Beyond that, though, we have the things like Regieleki and Rillaboom, Stakataka, Entei, Arcanine. There's still plenty of things that you can play alongside your Groudon to help facilitate your game plan of being a Sun team without having to have Chlorophyll or Solar Power on your team. When we look at the moves for Groudon, Precipice Blades this should be, say, 100% of the time, but there are players that do run high horsepower. That is a thing. People who don't want to risk getting misses or... you're still running a risk of a miss with high horsepower, but it's much better than Precipice Blades. Protect, Heat Crash, Substitute, Rock Slide, Swords Dance, Fire Punch, Thunder Punch. These are all common things we saw in Series 8. Heat Crash is the new addition to this roster, mainly because Heat Crash doesn't work on Dynamax Pokemon. So seeing Heat Crash here is kind of nice because it's just a very powerful fire-type move for Groudon. When you look at items, though, we see that they tend to either run super offensive with Life Orb or Wide Orb or Choice Band, or we can start to run towards the bulky support, bulky side with Citrus Berry or Leftovers or Lumberry. Groudon tends to really want to deal as much damage as possible and is really weak to Intimidate spam. So seeing the Life Orb as just a boost without having to worry about Intimidate, the first Intimidate is usually a very common thing. When you're building with Groudon, you want your teammates that can abuse the weather that Groudon sets. It doesn't necessarily have to be Venusaur and Charizard. Entei is a very, very common one right now. Wolfey's team of Groudon, Entei, and Cherrim has kind of taken off a little bit. It's a very powerful core altogether because you have fire and the grass type, and you don't really want to have the water type on your team because Groudon reduces your water type damage. When you're building your Groudon teams, you want at least one answer, and probably at best to have two to Kyogre. This could be Rillaboom, this could be Venusaur, this could be Regieleki. Cherrim's a very decent answer. Mainly because if Kyogre gets the advantage, your Groudon's not doing anything. Your Groudon can't sit in front of a Water Spout or a Scald most of the time without being very invested in special defense and HP, and then your Groudon's not doing damage to begin with, and it's just this vicious cycle of I need damage on Groudon. Well, I can't do damage on Groudon because I need to survive this water spout, but I need damage on Groudon, and you just kind of fall into that cycle. Looking at movesets for Groudon, Groudon tends to be fairly bulky and offensive as a whole. A lot of these sets have decent HP investment and really good attack investment. And then there's the varying degrees of speed. When I was doing research for this, I found that Groudon has no good, set. There's no, above, heads and shoulders above everything else that it's the best set in the game. There's all these tens percenters. There's this first set, which is decent HP, decent attack, a little bit of special defense, and very minimal speed investment. We slapped Assault Vest on this thing so we can take Water Spout from 252 Kyogre in the Sun. Heat Crash, Precipice Blades, Thunder Punch, Rock Slide. Thunder Punch is a 2-hit KO into Kyogre with this set as well. This Life Orb set looks to just go all out, hit as hard as you possibly can, run players over, and do all your normal Groudon things. This is very reminiscent of the set that Carter is currently playing with Rock Slide, Heat Crash, Precipice Blades, and Protect with the Life Orb. And this last set is something I really like. White Herb Groudon is something I've become a fan of for the most part when it comes to my Groudon sets. Substitute is underutilized a ton by a lot of Pokemon. It's not just for Zacian. But the cool part is you get to ignore potential other Intimidates after you get that Intimidate off, because an Incineroar, even at -1, is not going to want to take that Precipice Blade, so they're likely going to switch out, and that's when you get to do your substitute thing. Yes, you can still get hit by Parting Shot, but being able to ignore the -2 that would be an Intimidate Parting Shot is critical for keeping your Groudon going. Looking to beat Groudon is fairly simple, honestly, because Groudon is a ground type, not a fire type like we see with Primal Groudon. It suffers from a lot of weaknesses of commonly used types, specifically Grass, Water, and Ice. Rillaboom, Serena, Kyogre, Suicune, Tapu Fini. There's a whole slew of these Pokemon. Calyrex Ice is a good one too, that we don't normally see. And Weavile from last week. Weavile also is a decent Groudon answer. Intimidate spam can be helpful in pacing down Groudon, but don't get complacent because some sets run Swords Dance. That's kind of the check into Intimidate, is if you're going to sit there and cycle Intimidate and not put out any pressure, that Groudon is just going to click Swords Dance and negate that whole turn cycle of you trying to cycle out and Intimidate. And Groudon almost always has to spec to survive against Kyogre a little bit while in Sun. So having cheeky sets that Groudon can't normally spec for can usually help you out and work wonders when you're trying to beat it up. One of my favorite ones is making sure that my Wood Hammer on my Rillaboom is enough to pick up Groudon. Not necessarily Grassy Glide because it's not the best, but making sure Wood Hammer can do it is something that I always try to check on my Rillaboom sets. Another one is Scald from Kyogre. Instead of trying to do Water Spout, because my Kyogre is probably going to take damage while we're in Sun, if Scald can be a 3-hit KO a lot of the times, it's usually enough to where we can whittle down a Groudon to where we can pick it up. To wrap up here with Groudon, Groudon has surprised us before in Series 8, but the loss of its partners in Dynamax might be enough to relegate it to the sidelines. Groudon's in that weird gray area of, is it a top 5 restricted, or is it a bottom 5 restricted? Still yet to be determined on all that. The format is still very fresh and very young. But with all that being said, Groudon still packs a wallop. If you watch the showdown on Sunday, my Groudon got intimidated a ton, and I picked up a ton of KOs still with Life Orb. So as long as this Groudon's got the proper team built around it, it can push its Sun dominance even in front of a Kyogre, even in front of all these offensive Pokemon that are looking to beat it up. Groudon is definitely not something to sleep on, and you need to be ready for it. With that being said, I want to thank you all for hanging out and listening to me rant about Groudon today. Make sure to check us out on Twitter. Handles are there on screen. Check the Discord link in the description below. And remember to do all the YouTube stuff for us. Subscribe, like, comment, all that fun stuff. And with that being said, have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening throughout the world, and we will see you all on Friday with Arcanine. Bye, everyone.